Now reaching the end of one of the most polarising and expensive presidential campaigns in American history. And according to polls, both Barack Obama and Mitt Romney have reached election day stuck in a dead heat. But now it's the turn of the American people to finally cast their vote, as one advisor to President Obama puts it, to decide which side is bluffing. And whoever's going to get the job is going to have an in-tray in the Oval Office full to the brim, starting with the American economy, but also including key foreign policy challenges. We're hoping in a moment to talk to our correspondent in Chicago, Franz Van Kat's Nathan King. But before we do that, let's introduce my guests. With me here in Paris is Ellen Vasilina, a member of Republicans Abroad, and Bob Vallier, a member of Democrats Abroad. From New York, Leah Pizarre, a former advisor to President Bill Clinton. And from Washington, D.C., Tim Kaine, the chief economist at the Hudson Institute, a conservative-leaning think tank. And we were hoping to go to Nathan King in Chicago, which of course is where President Obama is spending his last day. It's his hometown, but apparently we're having technical problems, so we should go back now to my guests here. And first of all, Leah, let's just talk about that crucial swing state, Ohio. Everybody says if Obama wins Ohio, the show is over. What are you expecting? Are you expecting this to be a long night for Americans?
Well, Ohio has always been the bellwether, and I think for the last 12 or so elections, no president has been elected without winning Ohio. I hope it's not a long night, but it could very well be a long night because, you know, the polls have been so close. But I'm also hoping that by the time the Colorado results come in, we have a better idea of where things stand.
Bob, you're nodding there.
I think that's exactly right. Ohio is going to be very, very close and very difficult. It's going to take a while to count the votes in Ohio. And I think there's going to be some issues. I don't doubt for a second that there's going to be some sort of legal questions, if not actions, that arise tomorrow coming out of Ohio and coming out of Florida, as has been the case the last couple of times. The good news in Ohio for Obama is that the unemployment rate there is actually at 7%, which is lower than the national average, and that's due in large part, in fact, to the auto bailout and to the stimulus plan. And Ohioans know that. Overall, the unemployment picture, not just in Ohio, but across the United States, globally speaking, has been improving. And if you look at the trend lines over the last 36 months, you see unemployment steadily but sluggishly going down. You see more Americans returning to work. You see new housing starts. All of the economic trend lines are, in fact, indicative of a slow, it's true, and sluggish improvement in the economy.
But then the budget deficit is going up too, isn't it?
Well, the budget deficit is going up, but it's not going up any faster or any larger than it has under any other president of the Democratic Party. Historically speaking, Democrats are much better for the economy. If you look at the last 44 years, in fact, you'll see that in those 44 years, I think 24 have been controlled by Republicans and 20 by Democrats, but the 20 years by Democrats have stimulated significantly more job growth, larger numbers of jobs, and a better economy than have the years of Republican administration.
But look at the deficit too. You know, how are we going to, control the deficit? All right, if we start, for example, if we look at the deficit, we have never been so high or in deficit since after the war, which is 35% of GDP. Mm-hmm. We're now there already, and Barack Obama has put on $1 trillion every year, more than any other president. How do you explain that?
Well, I think this idea that it's more than any other president is false, first of all. You look at the growth of the deficit and of the debt under Bush, and it's much more significant than it has been under Obama.
No,
it's much more significant. Reagan's administration added a great deal of deficit, much more so than did Clinton. Clinton left us with a surplus, and that surplus evaporated and turned into a black hole of debt and deficit under the previous administration.
Barack Obama is riding on the coat wings of Bill Clinton because he can't boast the record that Bill Clinton did.
Well, not yet. He needs 4 more years to do it.
Well,
and
no,
when he
Bill
has 4
Clinton
more
did
years,
it,
Bill Clinton and Barack Obama will be remembered as the 2 most important presidents of the latter half of the 20th century.
Bob, at this point, I just want to bring in Tim Kaine from Washington, D.C. Tim, tell me, if if Mitt Romney gets into the White House, will we really discover who he is? Because part of the problem with him has been the fact that he's been seen as a bit of a flip-flopper.
Yeah. I think Mitt Romney doesn't really fit our ideological definitions, and that's what it's like when you have somebody who's truly post-partisan. Barack Obama pretended to be post-partisan, and he governed from the hard left. In fact, as someone who admires Bill Clinton's economic record, I think Clinton supporters were really shocked to see he didn't do what Americans call triangulate. He didn't really go to the center, even after his party was defeated soundly in 2010. I think what you'd see from Mitt Romney presidency is somebody who's not necessarily liberal or conservative. His philosophy is problem solver. And he identifies and he talks about the biggest problem America faces is a runaway deficit. The facts are it's gone up much higher every year under this president, with about $1 trillion a year, 7% of GDP, than has ever been done. And he's done it 4 years in a row. So those are the facts. I think Mitt Romney recognizes we have an entitlement crisis. In all of Europe, European countries know this. They're having the same problem. But Mitt Romney is someone I think who will actually lead the way in how Western democracies can resolve entitlement crises, not by kicking the can down the road, which is what we've seen from this administration, but by actually talking about it and doing it, working for a solution in a bipartisan way.
Leah Pizarro in New York, do you have any comment to that?
Yes, I would refer you to a plethora of articles and comments about Mr. Romney's economic plan, and most specifically this week to the Economist and the Financial Times. I think the Financial Times called it fiscal alchemy, and they're just saying the numbers don't add up. Martin O'Malley, the governor of Maryland, had this great line where he said his economic promises are the equivalent of telling you you can pig out on cake and still not gain weight. So the real question is, and you asked it, who is the real Mitt Romney, and how on earth does this stuff add up?
One thing that we've been talking about here, and I want to direct this question again to Leah, given your previous involvement with the Clinton administration, is the fact that there's been a great deal of disenchantment over President Obama's performance as in his first term. Do you think if he wins a second term that we're going to see a more transformational president as opposed to a transactional president? For instance, are we going to see a sort of more aggressive foreign policy on his part?
Yes, we might, but yes, this has been said a lot. You have to realize, and he said it himself, he's no longer just a candidate, he's the president, and he's the president with very big and serious responsibilities, with very big problems to solve, many of which were inherited from the Bush years. Others have appeared during his presidency. And I think he still feels he has a tremendous amount to do. So yes, he will do it. And as he says, forward.
Ellen, you don't want to give him a second chance, do you?
No, frankly. I mean, there were so many other things to do and preoccupations, the economy, as we said, jobs, jobs, jobs. This has been the idea of this whole campaign. When you look at how the deficit is growing, healthcare was not one of the things what shouldn't have been their priority. Jobs, economy should have been their priority. So I think Mitt Romney is certainly much better suited and better outfitted to address that situation.
At this point, I'm just going to bring in our correspondent, Franz Van Katz, Nathan King, who's normally based in New York but has been spending the last 3 weeks on the election trail, and we're now going to join him in Chicago. Nathan, as I was saying earlier, this is President Obama's last day, and where has he spent it? He's spent it in his hometown. What's the mood like there? Is it pretty somber?
Well, it's funny, I've just been speaking to Robert Gibbs, who is the former White House press secretary, and he said the mood is nervous, but they think they're going to win, and they're going through all the usual superstitions that they do. Remember, Barack Obama is playing basketball today. The one time he did not do that on Election Day, he lost New Hampshire, and so he will be doing that here in Chicago and then watching the election returns with his wife, Mrs. Obama, and also Vice President Biden, his wife as well. And they're basically feeling that the only thing that could deny them this election is if their voters don't turn out in the numbers that they think they're going to do. It's all about get out the vote. They are confident that the machinery that propelled him to a landslide victory nearly 4 years ago will be enough to return him to the presidency. They don't expect the same margins, but they are feeling confident about Virginia. And by the way, the polls closed in Virginia at the earliest time in our cycle, so we could get an idea of that very early on. And they are confident about Ohio. And if they take those two states, they will be almost certainly back in the White House. So it's quiet confidence, but there is nerves. Remember, this has been a long comeback, if you like, for Obama since the first debate. They know that he got knocked down on his knees, but the polls are all breaking a little bit late in those swing states for him, so they are confident. You can hear the preparations ramping up here behind me.
At this point, let me just bring in Tim Kaine. Thank you very much, Nathan, for that. Tim, we were talking there about voter turnout. That is absolutely crucial, isn't it? I mean, what's your estimation in terms of what is going to happen this time around?
The polls that I look at are fascinating because they have shown, in state-by-state polls, they have shown an Obama lead, but the internals on these polls show that there are 4 Democratic voters for every 3 Republicans. And that doesn't really make sense. I mean, is there that level of enthusiasm among Democrats like in 2008? And I think everyone would agree no. So nobody really knows what the turnout will look like. On the other hand, this is to the Obama team's credit. They've done a really good job of getting early voting in. So America, it's kind of a new experience for us historically in the last decade or so. A lot of states have adopted early voting. So 1 or 2 weeks before, you can mail in your ballot. And I think the Obama team's been ahead on that. So there's a big question mark. But I think if turnout is, as I expect it to be, more even between the two parties or even a Republican advantage, it will be a landslide for Romney.
Bob, what is...
Sorry, I can't stop laughing.
Okay, well, clearly you're going to have to say something in regards to what Tim just said, but one of the problems has been with the American electorate that people really don't see that much difference between the two candidates.
Well, there is a pretty clear difference between the two candidates. It has been made manifest for the last couple of months since the two conventions. One clear manifest difference is that Barack Obama has some principles. We know what they are. We know that he embodies them. We know that he keeps his word. And Mitt Romney seems to change his principle depending on which audience he's talking to. You used the metaphor earlier of trying to organize a fractious family, which is very nice. It's the best metaphor I've heard for that from your side lately. But really, for us, he's a chameleon. He has changed his position on everything and from week to week. So we will never know what Mitt Romney we're going to have in the White House. And a whole lot of people are going to be disappointed with him on both the left and the right because we don't know who he is. Obama, we know who he is and we know what he stands for.
He had 4 years to observe in Massachusetts.
That's one of the reasons why he's going to win in Ohio and he's going to win in these other battleground states. And that's one of the reasons why people are indeed going to turn out to vote for him this week. So there are some pretty clear differences. If you want to have the meta argument about both parties are really in the pocket of Wall Street or something like this, well, that's another argument that we could have at another time. And I think some people do feel that way, probably for good reason. But for these two candidates, pretty clear-cut differences. One of them has to do with position and principle, and another one has to do with this idea that Ellen was saying earlier. Now it just slipped my mind exactly what she was saying that I was going to respond to, but there are clear-cut differences between the two.
Lab Pizarro, the thing is, though, it could be a case that Obama does win, but he could be confronting a Republican House, which could make his job very difficult.
It already has. But yes, that's a very likely scenario. It's also in the nature of the American system. You know, the founding fathers designed the system so that there would be checks and balances. Unfortunately, our experience has been that this Congress has been rather obstructionist. So I do hope that when President Obama is reelected, and no, it's not about a lack of leadership. It's really about an obstructionist Congress. And in fact, Romney at one point during the campaign said that his party had worked very cooperatively with President Obama, which we know is not the case. So, yes, it won't be a walk in the park for him, but he still has to plow forward.
I agree absolutely with you. The obstructionist Congress has been a problem from day one. Immediately upon taking office, the Republicans in Congress declared that their #1 priority was not jobs, jobs, jobs. It was to make Obama a one-term president.
Then how,
even after they initiated this
House
plan,
and Senate to get his laws through.
even after they initiated this plan to make him a one-term president and to not focus on jobs, 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 when they had the opportunity to do so, they instead voted to overturn Obamacare 33 times in a symbolic vote, which did absolutely nothing. Healthcare and healthcare insurance is indeed a priority to 60 million Americans who don't have it and who now do, even with pre-existing conditions. That's a privilege they did not have before. And a lot of kids, for example, with pre-existing conditions and impoverished conditions who normally don't have access to good medicine and to healthcare now do, thanks to Barack Obama.
Bob, Ellen, I just want to ask you, we wake up tomorrow morning, Mitt Romney loses. What will happen to the Republican Party? Will it implode?
No. Why?
Because, as you mentioned, it's a very fractious party at the moment.
Sure, but like I said, it's like a family. You know, we all pull together when there's a common goal, and the common goal is the nation. So we'll have to pull together, whether we win or lose. Okay, it doesn't mean that, you know, we're going to implode by goodness. Why? You know, we've been in you know, the history shows, you know, the Democrats were much more organized, I might say, at the beginning than the Republicans. And I'm doing a course over at CELSA, and I've done the history of the parties, and you see that the Democrats were very quickly much more organized than the Republican were, and they split off into different little factions, and they finally came together, I think, 40 years later or 60 years later than the Democrats did. So no, we're talking about 1842, I believe. Okay.
Leah Pizarro, can I just ask you, what will happen to the Democrats if President Obama doesn't get that second term?
I do not wish to entertain that possibility, but I think whichever party loses has to gather and reassess and you know, try to redesign its path.
And we have to work together, right, Leah?
Of course we have to work together, and we do, at least you and I do.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to see you in New York, by the way.
At this point, I'm afraid we've run out of time, and I really want to thank my guests who are in for a very long night. Ellen Vasilina, Bob Valier,
thank you.
Leah Pizarro in New York, and Tim Kaine. And that's it for this edition of The Debate. Do stay with us here on France 24 because we do have a special election coverage coming up.